The United States Constitution was written nearly 240 years ago, laying the foundation for an independent, democratic republic. But like most of this nation's laws, the Constitution was written by and for wealthy white men. And to put it simply, the US's legal system today feels in some ways both outdated and discriminatory, especially when it's under assault from President Donald J. Trump. It's this exact issue that Elie Mystal, justice correspondent at The Nation magazine, directly tackles in his new book, Bad Law: 10 Popular Laws That Are Ruining America. He highlights legislation from issues like immigration to LGBTQ rights that he believes should immediately be repealed. And I'm sure he would agree with me when I say there's a lot more than 10 laws that we could repeal to reverse this country's many injustices. But let's start with 10. Joining me now to discuss is the man himself, Elie Mystal. Elie, thanks so much for coming back on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me.
So early in your book, you write, the law is not an accident, it is a plan. It is written with intentionality by people who want to shape society in one way or another. In our society, that shape is distorted to benefit a ruling class of white male elites and the industries and opportunities those elites control. If that is the case, Elie, is it fair to call the US a full democracy if it's so tilted in one specific direction?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it depends on what you're comparing it to. But put like this, we are certainly not the greatest democracy on earth. I'm not sure that we're in the top 10. And that is because our laws, such as we have them, are functioning as intended, right? I think in my first book, I really talked about how the Constitution was being misinterpreted. In this book, I'm really trying to focus on laws that are functioning like they were supposed to. The problem is that they were supposed to function as racist, sexist, and anti-democratic laws. So let's think about reforming the laws, some of the laws that we have on our books, or really in my book, I'm talking about repealing. You were saying there are a lot more than 10 bad laws. My scoping mechanism was really like, all right, there are any number of laws that need to be reformed or massaged or updated for the modern age. What about the laws we can just get rid of? So, what about the stupid, racist, sexist, misogynist laws that we could just be rid of today and have our world be better tomorrow? And that's the scoping of the book.
Give our viewers, our subscribers, your number one. If Elie Mystal became dictator for a day, to quote Donald Trump, what is the one law you would get rid of first and quickest?
Right. So dictator for a day. I'm more thinking about Project 2029. Like somebody's got to start writing that, and it ain't going to be Chuck Schumer. The first law I get rid of is the first laws that I talk about in the book. I would get rid of all voter registration laws. Voter eligibility requirements make sense. We might disagree on what those eligibility requirements should be, but having some, standards for who is eligible to vote or not, that makes sense, and that happens in every other democracy on earth. Voter pre-registration. After you are eligible, having to pre-register, having to go through a second step in order to excise your franchise in what is supposed to be a democratic republic based on self-government, that's just dumb, and that's not how it's done in most of the rest of the world. Most of the rest of the world either has mandatory registration, fines you for not being registered, doesn't have registration at all, or you can register on the exact same day at the exact same time that you vote. Our system of forcing people to pre-register, it's just there for voter suppression, and it wasn't even endemic to the country. Voter registration laws did not become a thing in this country until after the Civil War, when you had an influx in the North of newly freed enslaved Africans and an influx of European immigrants. All of a sudden, maybe we should pre-register. It was for voter suppression, not voter security.
But the fraud, Elie, the fraud.
Exactly. Yeah, there is no real voter fraud. I do not believe, and one of the constant themes in my book, I do not believe that we should make our laws based on stories, based on boogeymen. You can't say, oh, we can't fish there. Why not? Because the Loch Ness Monster might get you. Well, no, he doesn't exist. Fish all you want. We're not going to restrict rights because of a boogeyman, right? But that's the first one. But the second law that I talk about in the book is super relevant to where we are today, because as many of your listeners know and your viewers know, Mehdi, one of the reasons why Mahmoud Khalil's in jail, one of the reasons why they are trying to deport that South Korean woman who's been here since she was 7 years old, is because of a function of the 1921 Immigration and Nationality Act that gives the Secretary of State, in this case Marco Rubio, the ability to pull people's legal permanent residencies based on his say-so, with no due process. That is not a Trump law. That is a bad law that comes to us from 1921, and I talk about that law in the book and how the 1921 Immigration and Nationality Act is one of the bad laws that needs to be repealed. It's functioning as intended, its function was racism.
Isn't the line about Marco Rubio having the power to get rid of someone because they have serious adverse effects on foreign policy? That's from the 1950s, though, right? I believe that's
from the 1950s update to the law.
Yes.
But the law as written in 1921, it's based, like, when you look at what they actually said, and I do this throughout the book, Mehdi, I try to use the word, like, you don't have to take my word that these laws are racist or whatever. You can look at what they said at the time. And in 1921, they were literally talking about needing this immigration law to prevent the mongrelization of the white race by inferior races. I don't think that's a good basis on which to make a national immigration law. And I think that it's something that we should be rid of in our modern world.
And in the 1950s, of course, when they passed this, the clause that Rubio is using, it was used to target Eastern European Jews who they suspected of being communists. And the ADL opposed it at the time. Today, the ADL supports it because it's being used against Muslims and Arabs. Liking this video? Then don't just watch. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism. Let me talk to you about another act that is being used against immigrants right now by the Trump administration, the Alien Enemies Act, which most people had never heard of till last year. Donald Trump started mentioning it on the campaign trail. I'm going to use the Alien Enemies Act. Then we all started Googling. And it's an act that had only been used 3 times in history during 3 wars, I believe 1812, World War I, and World War II. It was used by FDR to intern Japanese people. He is using it right now to send gay barbers to El Salvador, claiming they're gang members to be tortured. That's astonishing.
So the 1789 Aliens Enemies Act is the basis, as you point out, for the Korematsu decision, for the internment of Japanese American citizens during World War II. Now, you, I'm sure, remember that in Trump v. Hawaii, the Muslim ban case, John Roberts explicitly overturned Korematsu in that decision. Now, I thought it was a joke because I thought that he used the exact same logic of Korematsu while saying he overturned Korematsu. But now we're going to put it to the test. Because if John Roberts overturned Korematsu, then this use of the 1789 Alien Sedition Act is unconstitutional on its face. So what you got, John? And this is kind of the constant problem that we have right now, where Trump is doing facially illegal or unconstitutional things, but the Supreme Court is not stepping in and stopping him and preventing him from doing it, while he violates court orders left, right, and center. I mean, you saw, I'm sure, the Judge Busberg ruled that he needs to stop the deportations of these Venezuelan non-citizens, and Trump just straight up said, "We're not giving you any more information because it's all national security." Right? So, like, we keep running. Trump keeps running right up to the courthouse steps, getting turned down, and doing it anyway, and nobody's coming to stop him.
So, a few things there to follow up on. Number one. Korematsu was in World War II. We were actually at war with Imperial Japan. Right now, we're not at war with anyone. We're certainly not at war with Venezuela, which is supposed to control this gang. So they're using an act which was for wartime. It explicitly says Congress has to declare war. We haven't declared war with Venezuela. So, as you say, facially illegal. But what do you do about it, Elie? Because I saw a Washington Post story saying Trump is getting struck down by judges every 4 days, right? An astonishing number. And yet, to quote J.D. Vance from an interview a few years ago, what are you going to do about it? You and whose army, the Supreme Court, like, they have worked out, haven't they, these new authoritarians on the right, that actually, okay, every president's had to listen to Supreme Courts, but what if you didn't? What would happen?
When I say that we live in a fascist dictatorship, I don't know what people thought it was going to feel like. I don't know if people thought they were going to wake up one day and the New York Times was going to say, "Oh, we're fascists now." Mazel. Like, is that what they thought was going to happen? Because for any definition of the term, we have a president that now exists above the law and cannot be restrained by the law, which means we live under the whim of one man, or two, the co-president Trump and the co-president Elon Musk, right? Yes. We live under the whim of two co-presidents, not under the laws of our nation. And as you say, Mehdi, nobody's coming to stop him. Chuck Schumer, I saw this weekend, he was like, well, if the Trump defies the Supreme Court order, then the Democrats will fight like we've never fought before. I'm like, well, he's defying lower court orders now.
Yes.
All right. The Constitution does not say don't defy the Supreme Court order. Article 3 of the Constitution says that the federal judiciary has independent check and balance on the first two branches. The crisis is now. The constitutional crisis is here. The fascism is here. And so whatever we're doing right now is what we do in the face of fascism. And from our elected officials, that answer is nothing.
So legally, constitutionally, you're 100% right. It doesn't say lower courts you can ignore, higher courts is the big one. But in terms of politics, clearly, if he defies the Supreme Court, that will be a much bigger deal politically. That will be a much bigger deal in terms of public opinion. That will be a much bigger deal in terms of media coverage. Be a big deal in terms of Republicans and the cult of Trump. Will they actually finally say something? Almost certainly no. So what happens then, Elie? Just walk me through what happens then when the Supreme Court say, okay, you're misusing the Alien Enemies Act, or, you know, this clause of the Immigration Nationality Act, like Trump's late sister said, is unconstitutional. They say, F you. What happens next?
Well, first of all, I wrote in The Nation about how the Supreme Court, John Roberts specifically, is going to go out of his way to make sure that never happens. John Roberts is afraid of a confrontation with Trump over the meaning of the Constitution. And so what I predict is that with their 6-3 Republican supermajority, the Supreme Court is going to bend and shift and change itself so that they can say Donald Trump is not in violation, right? Even if they might disagree with his process of doing certain things, but they will fundamentally uphold his right to do these things to avoid exactly this kind of confrontation. Never forget that these are the people that gave Trump absolute immunity for official acts. So these people are already in his pockets, and they will try to avoid a direct confrontation.
So you don't think Amy Coney Barrett is coming to save the Republic?
No, I don't. I don't think she wears a cape under her hood. I don't think that that's how it works, right? But the other, how it's going to play out is that they will avoid a direct confrontation with Trump over the things that he has direct power over. So when it comes to kidnapping, abducting, and putting immigrants on planes, they're going to let him do that. Where they might push back on him is on things where he does not have direct control and power over the situation. So for instance, his conflicts with the states, right? The lawsuits from New York trying to like stop congestion pricing or whatever that is. If it's an issue where a state or local official can stand up to Trump and is standing up to Trump, and Trump says no, the Supreme Court might weigh in on behalf of the state or local official, right? Trump might want to defy those orders as well. But if you're going to defy an order supporting New York State, then you have to be willing to put boots on the ground across the GW, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think at this point Trump wants to put boots on the ground in Manhattan to force Kathy Hochul to do what he wants her to do. So on these issues of state and local control, I do think you will see some Supreme Court pushback against Trump. But when it comes to federal government and the things that he can personally touch and rule, and he and Musk can touch, I think the Supreme Court is going to let him have it all the way down so that they don't have exactly the kind of conflict you're talking about.
The Trump is
which is terrible, by the way. Which is,
of course,
which is not good.
No, and we could have had a reformed Supreme Court if Democrats had actually realized the power of the Supreme Court when they had office. Let me ask you this: it's not just the judges he's attacking or politicians. He's also going after law firms, Elie. You're seeing Paul Weiss having rolled over one of the country's most elite law firms. He's taking Coy Perkins, he's targeting. He's all these quote-unquote democratic law firms that he believes have been engaged in lawfare against him and bad practices and just being mean to him. Covington Burley, all these big firms. And it looks like they're all rolling over. And even the ones who want to stand up to him, no one's backing them up. There's a big Financial Times piece out this week. Basically, none of the law firms even wanted to talk to the FT. They're so scared of Trump targeting them. What do you make of that? I assume you're not surprised to see this cowardice from Big Law.
So I used to work in Big Law. I worked for one of these white shoe, prestigious Manhattan law firms for the first, 10 years of my career. I covered Big Law extensively. I am deeply saddened by the cowardice we're seeing from the elite law firms in the country, because these are people who are most able to protect themselves from Donald Trump. These are the people with the maximum amount of resources and training to defend themselves from Trump up and down through the court systems. These are generally rich white men. These are people with nothing to fear but their wallets. And that turns out to be all they care about. They only have to fear losing some margin of profit if Trump goes after them, and that's the thing they want to lose least. Mehdi, you and I know there are people risking their lives to oppose this man. There are people who have been shaved and put on planes, who have been renditioned, who have been disappeared to oppose this man. And you're talking about some of the most powerful people in the legal community who have nothing to fear, who are rolling over and playing like cowards. It is incredibly disappointing. And just on one particular internecine point that they try to, Brad Karp, the CEO of Paul Weiss, tried to say, like, oh, actually, it's the other law firms. They're going to steal our clients if we don't roll over. Man, these firms collude on price all the time. They have no problems colluding when it comes to worker pay, when it comes to worker benefit packages, when it comes to retirement program packages. I covered it for 10 years. They all collude around the same price point. But you're telling me they can't collude on the same on stopping Trump, on standing together and not eating each other's clients as they stand united against Trump? It's bullcrap, man. They have the power to stand up to him. They are sniveling and afraid to do so.
Well said. One last question before I let you go. I know you have to run. Just about the book, I got to come back to the book and say one of the laws that you highlight in the book actually surprised me. The Airline Deregulation Act, a law you claim makes you irrationally angry. Very briefly, because I know you got to run. Why did you choose that law? Why does it matter for more than just air travel?
The Airline Deregulation Act is the canary in the coal mine of how the Democrats lost the last 50 years of the public conversation. It is the proof of the Democrats falling into what's called neoliberalism, giving to the market what should be government services. And whenever Democrats do that, the people who get kicked out are labor and consumer services and consumer protections. And that is what happened in the airline industry, and that is what happened in every industry that they've deregulated, from the financial banks to the telecommunications industry to private prisons right now. It is the reason Democrats fail, and that, even more than the planes, are why that particular law makes me irrationally angry. And every major Democratic figure over the past 40 years in some way has their hand in the deregulation nightmare.
Elie Mystal, we'll have to leave it there. The book is called Bad Law, 10 Popular Laws That Are Ruining America. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Love coming on with you.
Appreciate it. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.